They said her smile was too bright for a girl with nothing. They said her peace angered the unseen world. They said misfortune followed her wherever she went. But no one asked the most important question. What if the girl they mocked was innocent? And what if the woman they praised was the true danger? This is not just a story about jealousy. It is a story about how envy can poison a heart, how lies can destroy an innocent life, and how destiny always waits patiently until the truth can no longer be hidden. This is the story of Goy. Goy was not the loudest girl in the village. She did not force her presence into conversations, nor did she compete for attention. Yet somehow, wherever she went, people noticed her. There was something about her calm spirit, something about the way she greeted elders with respect, the way she helped without being asked, the way she smiled even when life gave her no obvious reason to. She lived with her parents in a modest compound at the edge of the village. Their home was simple, but it was filled with peace. Goy fetched water every morning, swept the compound before sunrise, and still found time to help neighbors with small chores. People often said, "That girl carries light in her spirit." But light, as beautiful as it is, always attracts shadows. Mama Kai lived closer to the village center. She was known as a woman who laughed loudly and spoke confidently. To outsiders, she seemed warm and proud, the kind of woman who always reminded people of her daughter's beauty and great destiny. But behind closed doors, Mama Kai's heart was restless. Each time she saw Goy praised, something tightened inside her chest. Each compliment Goy received felt like a personal insult to her. How can that girl be admired so easily? She often wondered. What does she have that my daughter does? Mama Kai smiled whenever Goy passed by, but her eyes told a different story. They followed Goy closely, measuring, comparing, calculating. Envy had quietly entered her heart, and it did not come alone. Chidinma, Mama Kai's daughter, was beautiful in her own way. She dressed well, spoke confidently, and dreamed loudly of a future bigger than the village. But something bothered her deeply. Whenever Goy walked by, people turned to look. Whenever Goy spoke, people listened. Whenever Goy smiled, it felt natural. Chidinma tried harder, brighter clothes, louder laughter, sharper words, but the admiration she wanted never stayed. "She thinks she's better than me," Chidinma said one evening, packing their compound. Mama Kai said nothing, but her silence was agreement. That night, envy stopped being a feeling. It became a shared decision. It always begins with whispers. Someone said Goy was too fortunate for someone of her background. Another said strange things happened wherever she went. Soon, stories grew longer and darker. "Have you noticed?" they said. "She never struggles like the rest of us." Goy felt the change before she understood it. Conversations stopped when she approached. Smiles became forced. Invitations disappeared. She searched her heart for what she had done wrong, but isolation is not always loud. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Goy noticed friends no longer came by. Children stopped running toward her. Even greetings became brief and distant. She sat alone under her favorite tree one afternoon, watching life move on without her. Her heart ached, not from anger but from confusion. "What have I done?" she whispered to herself. But envy never answers honestly. Mama Kai watched the isolation with satisfaction. The village was already turning. "This is not enough," she muttered one night. She wanted Goy completely broken, so her daughter could rise without comparison. Under the cover of darkness, Mama Kai prepared something she had learned long ago. Not food, not medicine. Intent. Because sometimes, the most dangerous ingredient is not what you add, but why you add it. The next day, Mama Kai approached Goy warmly. "My daughter," she said sweetly, "you look tired. Eat this, it will give you strength." Goy hesitated only for a moment. Mama Kai was older, a mother, a respected woman. She accepted it with gratitude. Trust walked straight into betrayal, without knowing. That night, Goy felt strange. Her body felt heavy. Her thoughts felt cloudy. Her dreams became restless. Something had entered her life quietly, and it had no intention of leaving peacefully. The seed of envy had finally been planted. Betrayal her. At first, Goy thought it was exhaustion. She woke up one morning feeling as though she had carried a heavy load through the night. Her limbs felt stiff, her head throbbed gently, and her chest felt tight, not painful, just uncomfortable, like something was pressing inward. She forced herself out of bed anyway. In Goy's world, rest was a luxury. She swept the compound slowly, leaning on the broom whenever her vision blurred. The sounds of the village waking up, radios playing gospel songs, roosters crowing, women calling out greetings, felt unusually loud. Neighbors noticed her slow movements. "Goy, are you well?" someone asked. She smiled weakly and nodded. "I'm fine, just tired." But deep inside, she knew something was wrong. As days passed, the tiredness refused to leave. Goy began to experience moments she could not explain. She would start a sentence and forget how it ended. Sometimes she stood still in the middle of the compound, staring at nothing, her mind strangely empty. One afternoon, while fetching water, she dropped the bucket. The loud sound startled her, and before she knew it, tears spilled from her eyes. Her mother rushed to her side. "What is it, my child?" Goy shook her head slowly. "I don't know. I feel like I'm not fully here." Her father watched from a distance, worry carving deep lines into his face. At first, the village showed concern. Women stopped by with advice. Men nodded sympathetically. Some even prayed quietly for her. But concern soon grew impatient. "She's been like this for too long," someone said. "Normal sickness doesn't behave this way." The whispers returned, louder, sharper. Goy felt them like stones thrown at her back. Wherever she went, conversations paused. Eyes followed her steps. Children stared openly, their curiosity unfiltered. She lowered her head, not because she felt guilty, but because the weight of judgment had become unbearable. Market day was usually lively, laughter, bargaining, noise. But that day, it became Goy's breaking point. As she walked between stalls, the world suddenly spun. Her heart raced wildly. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the dusty ground, gasping for breath. A trader laughed. Another followed. "Is she acting?" someone mocked. "This is how they pretend." Tears streamed down Goy's face as she shook uncontrollably, humiliated in front of the same people she had once helped without hesitation. No hand reached out. The market that once felt like home turned into a courtroom, and she had already been judged. That night, Goy's parents sat quietly beside her. Her mother wiped her face with a damp cloth again and again, whispering prayers under her breath. Her father sat on a plastic chair, elbows on his knees, staring into nothing. "We didn't raise her this way," he finally said, his voice cracking. "Our daughter is not like this." But knowing the truth didn't stop the pain. They listened as Goy cried softly, apologizing for something she didn't understand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know why this is happening." Sleep abandoned Goy completely. Each night she woke suddenly, heart pounding, breath uneven, eyes wide with fear. Sometimes she spoke in fragments. Sometimes she stared at the ceiling until dawn. Her parents took turns, sitting beside her bed. They noticed something else. Goy no longer recognized familiar moments. She would ask the same question repeatedly, or forget what she had just said. The fear in their hearts deepened. "This is beyond us," her mother whispered one night. Gradually, visitors stopped coming. The compound grew quiet, too quiet. Neighbors crossed the road to avoid Goy's parents. Friends who once laughed with her no longer visited. Even greetings were hurried and uncomfortable. Isolation settled in like dust, slowly, completely. Goy sat outside one afternoon, watching people pass by without looking at her. She had become invisible, and yet painfully noticeable. One morning, Goy collapsed while trying to stand. Her body simply refused to cooperate. Her father lifted her gently, tears streaming freely down his face. Her mother cried openly now, no longer trying to be strong. "We cannot stay like this," her father said firmly. "We will take her to the priest." They wrapped Goy in a light cloth and supported her weak steps as they walked toward the road. For the first time in weeks, Goy felt something stir inside her. Hope's faint, fragile but alive. The moment the priest laid eyes on Goy, his expression changed. He had seen many people brought into the church with sickness, sorrow, and desperation, but this was different. Goy's body looked weak, yet something heavier hung around her, something unseen, pressing down on her spirit. As her parents helped her onto a wooden bench inside the quiet church, the priest stood still, studying her closely. The air felt thick, almost heavy, as if the walls themselves were listening. "What happened to her?" he asked softly. Her mother spoke through tears, explaining everything, the sudden change, the whispers, the humiliation, the sleepless nights. The priest closed his eyes briefly. "This is not ordinary," he said calmly, "but she did not bring this upon herself." Goy heard those words, and for the first time in a long while she felt seen. The priest began gently. He prayed in a steady voice, calling on God's mercy, speaking words of peace, asking for clarity. He sprinkled holy water lightly, not dramatically, but with quiet authority. At first, nothing happened. Then Goy's breathing changed. Her chest rose and fell too fast, as if she had been running. Her hands trembled slightly. A low cry escaped her lips, not loud, but filled with confusion. Her parents panicked. "Hold her," the priest instructed calmly. He continued praying, louder now, firmer. The atmosphere shifted. Even the faint sounds from outside, passing footsteps, distant traffic, seemed to fade away. Something had been disturbed. Without warning, Goy cried out. Her body stiffened, her hands clenched tightly, and her head jerked slightly as though resisting something pulling at her from the inside. Tears streamed from her eyes, but her voice sounded distant, unfamiliar. Her mother screamed her name. The priest stepped forward, his voice unwavering. "Be still," he commanded gently but firmly. "This child belongs to God." Goy shook violently now, her breath uneven, her body trembling under a force she could not explain. It felt like a storm trapped inside her chest, loud, chaotic, terrifying. The church doors were closed. What was happening inside was not meant for spectators. The priest knew he could not do this alone. He stepped outside briefly and made calls, not to create a crowd, but to gather strength. Within an hour, other pastors and senior ministers arrived quietly, their faces serious, their movements purposeful. No shouting. No show. Only faith. They surrounded Goy gently, placing hands on her shoulders and arms, praying in unity. Voices rose together not in chaos, but in agreement. Hours passed. Sweat rolled down foreheads, knees ached, but no one stopped. Outside, the sun moved slowly across the sky. Inside the church, prayers continued uninterrupted. Goy screamed, cried, and then fell silent, only to begin again moments later. Her parents sat on the floor now, exhausted, whispering prayers of their own. "Please," her mother sobbed quietly, "she is all we have." The ministers pressed on. Faith is not loud confidence, it is endurance. Then, suddenly, silence. Goy's body relaxed. Her breathing slowed. Her clenched hands loosened. The tension that filled the room lifted, as if a window had been opened. The priest raised his head slowly. "Continue," he said softly. One final prayer was spoken, calm, assured, gentle. And then it happened. Goy exhaled deeply and fell into a peaceful sleep. When Goy opened her eyes, they were clear. She looked around slowly, recognition returning to her face. Her first sight was her mother, crying openly, and her father, kneeling beside the bench. "Mama," Goy whispered. Her mother collapsed into tears. The priest nodded quietly. She is back. Goy felt weak, but her mind was her own again. The fog that had wrapped around her thoughts was gone. That evening, Goy's parents knelt before the altar, thanking God endlessly. The priest spoke gently but firmly. "This did not come from her," he said, "and whoever sent it will answer for it." The words settled heavily in the air. Outside, the sky darkened. Far away, a celebration was already being planned, unaware that truth had been released. The palace compound overflowed with music. Drums beat rhythmically, echoing across the village and beyond. Women danced in colorful modern lace gowns, men laughed loudly, and the sound of celebration filled the air like smoke. It was the wedding day of Chidinma and the prince. From early morning, the palace had been alive. Chairs were arranged neatly. Canopies shaded important guests. Food cooked in large pots, and laughter bounced freely between walls. To many, it was a dream union. But dreams built on envy do not stand long. Mama Kai walked proudly among the guests. Her head was held high, her wrapper perfectly tied, her blouse shining in the sun. She smiled as people greeted her respectfully, soaking in the attention like a long-awaited reward. "Did I not tell you?" she said repeatedly. "My daughter was destined for greatness." She laughed loudly, her voice rising above the music. To her, this wedding was not just a celebration, it was proof that she had won. But destiny does not reward wickedness forever. Just as the drums reached their loudest rhythm, the sky changed. The sun dimmed unexpectedly. A sudden wind rushed through the courtyard, knocking over light decorations and sending shivers through the guests. Then thunder. Not distant, not gentle. A loud crack split the sky, silencing the drums instantly. People froze. Another thunder followed, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Fear replaced laughter in seconds. Without warning, Chudunma screamed. She clutched her chest and collapsed onto the palace floor, her bridal attire gathering dust. Mama Ka rushed toward her, but before she could reach her daughter, she too fell. Both women cried out in pain, rolling on the ground as if struck by unseen blows. Guests scattered in panic. The music stopped. The dancing ended. The celebration died instantly. Chidinma's voice rose above the chaos. "Please forgive me," she cried, tears streaking her face as she rolled on the ground. "It wasn't my idea." The crowd froze. "It was my mother," she screamed desperately. "She gave Goy something. She made her lose her senses." Gasps rippled through the courtyard. "My mother planned everything," Chidinma sobbed. "She couldn't stand Goy's peace." The prince stood frozen, his face drained of color. Truth had finally found a voice. No one spoke. Women covered their mouths. Men shook their heads slowly. Elders exchanged heavy glances. Mama Kai tried to speak, but her body betrayed her. She convulsed violently, her eyes rolling back as if something had released its final grip. A final scream escaped her lips. Then stillness. Mama Kai collapsed, unmoving. Something snapped inside Chidinma. She jumped to her feet suddenly, laughter spilling from her mouth, wild, uncontrolled. She tore at her bridal dress, pulling her hair, dancing erratically across the courtyard. People stepped back in horror. She screamed at voices no one else could hear, then ran through the palace gates and disappeared down the road. The celebration had become a nightmare. The palace stood silent. Drums lay untouched, food went cold, guests left quietly shaken. Everyone understood now. The suffering of an innocent girl had been the price of another woman's envy. Far away, Goy sat quietly with her parents, unaware that justice had spoken loudly in her absence. News travels fast in a village. Before sunset, whispers had already turned into full conversations. By nightfall, the truth had reached every compound, every roadside bench, every listening ear. Mama Kai was gone. Chidinma had lost her senses, and the confession had been heard by all. The same mouths that once mocked Goy now fell silent. Some people shook their heads in disbelief. Others sat quietly, remembering the laughter, the pointing fingers, the cruel jokes they had joined without asking questions. Guilt spread through the village like harmattan dust, settling slowly, heavily. For the first time, the village understood something painful. They had been wrong. Back in her parents' home, Goy rested quietly. Her body was still weak, but her mind was clear. For the first time in many weeks, she slept peacefully through the night, no fear, no confusion, no sudden awakenings. When she woke up, sunlight filled the room. She sat up slowly, feeling present, whole. Her mother watched her closely, afraid to hope too much. But when Goy smiled, a real smile, her mother burst into tears. "My child," she whispered, pulling her into an embrace. "You are back." Goy nodded softly. "Yes, Mama, I am." Some villagers came quietly. They did not come in groups. They came one by one, with lowered heads and uncomfortable silence. "We are sorry," a woman said softly, avoiding Goy's eyes. "We spoke wrongly." Others said nothing at all, their silence louder than words. Goy listened. She nodded. She did not argue, she did not accuse. But something inside her had changed. Forgiveness does not always mean returning to the same place. That night, Goy spoke to her parents. "I want to leave the village," she said gently. Her parents were silent at first, not because they disagreed, but because they understood. "This place remembers your pain," her father said quietly. "And healing needs space." Arrangements were made quietly, no announcement, no drama. Just a decision, rooted in self-respect. The city was loud, busy, alive. For Goy, it felt like breathing fresh air for the first time. She moved in with her aunt, a kind woman who asked no painful questions, only offered support. Slowly, Goy found her rhythm again. She learned. She worked. She healed. No one knew her past. No one judged her story. She was simply Goy, and that was enough. Years passed. Then one day, Goy met a man who listened more than he spoke, a man who respected her silence and valued her peace. He did not rush her. He did not question her worth. He loved her gently. For the first time, Goy understood that love was not loud pain, it was quiet safety. Years later, when Goy looked back, she understood something deeply. Envy is a silent poison. It destroys the one who carries it long before it reaches its target. What you plan against another will always return to you. But innocence, no matter how delayed, will always be vindicated. Goy's life became living proof that destiny cannot be stolen. It can only be delayed. Do not let jealousy push you into wickedness. Celebrate others genuinely. Every destiny shines in its own time. Karma never sleeps. Truth never dies. And innocence always finds its way home. Hello, my bestie's yellow heart. What are your thoughts about this story? Please share them in the comments section. I really want to hear from you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Thank you so much for your love and support. I appreciate every single one of you. See you in my next story. Bye for now, waving sparkles.